We are live on the opening night of NFL football in a season we didn't know whether it was going to happen or not. And we're not going to talk about the Houston versus Kansas City game that's going on my screen right there that I'll occasionally be glancing at. We're going to talk about your Cleveland Browns. This is like the unofficial preview because we have much better qualified people to actually give a preview and much funnier people to give a funny preview. So
I
this is
was
just
going to ask if you when you were talking about qualified, are you talking about Dave and Dylan?
they're qualified for something, but analysis probably isn't it.
Oh, I'm so excited for the return of Friday Fumble. You have no
Me
idea. I
too.
love it.
Me
I
too.
absolutely love it.
We're gonna
They
have to
make
get
the
them on this platform as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like they make the Brown seasons so much more tolerable. These last few years would have been so much worse without those guys.
Yeah. So before we take the wide angle view, let's attack the current event. It's something that we talked about on the website. Um, the extension for Kareem Hunt. And were you surprised at just how quickly everybody jumped to conclusions about what it means for Nick Chubb?
Yes, I was very surprised. I think I had posted inside our Slack. I had seen a tweet from I don't remember which, a national fantasy guy, and he's like, "Is there a worse play this year than Nick Chubb as your running back?" And it was like, I don't like this hasn't changed anything with the Browns. Like this is setting up moves two or three steps down the road. But for this season, it's not going to change anything in the way Kevin Stefanski is going to approach the offense this year. So I was definitely surprised by that. I think if you're not expecting the Browns to use a healthy amount of Nick Chubb, I think you're sorely mistaken.
That's a really good point. Like fantasy guy, if you weren't worried about Nick Chubb 2 weeks ago, the extension that takes place not this year, but the following year and the year after that, like should have no bearing on what your preseason predictions were for Nick Chubb.
Right. Like it'd been one thing if and maybe this guy was because I'm not familiar with him, but maybe he was saying ahead of time that Nick Chubb was a bad play just because of Kareem Hunt, being there for the full season this year. I would still obviously disagree with that. But yeah, to sit there and think that because Kareem Hunt signed a contract, that suddenly that changes the way he's going to be used is just crazy. It's that the Browns have an unbelievable luxury, and I will reject anybody who tries to spin this in any kind of negative or anything like that. Like, this is the Browns' strength is that running back room.
You know what though, Andrew? They only have one ball. They only
Only
have one
one
ball.
ball. No coach has ever figured out how to implement multiple running backs. It's just never been done. What are we going to do?
Who needs LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love? There's only
Yeah,
one ball.
only one ball. You just need one.
All right. So the Browns are set to take on the Ravens. It's absolutely if it's normally impossible to predict what's going to happen in an NFL game without a preseason and everything else, it's even that much more impossible.
Yeah, I think it's pretty well documented. In just not just the Browns, but reading capsules about every team in the league, and all the writers are more or less saying the same thing. They have no idea where these teams are, and we're just not going to know what this is going to look like until the games start playing out. But certainly the reduced training camp, the lack of preseason, you would certainly expect at least this first game to be rough for everybody. And I listened to the Athletics podcast, Civilized Barking. Zach had on a Baltimore writer, and they broke down the game, and they were kind of talking a little bit too about how in this game the Ravens are returning their entire coaching staff. I think they only are replacing one guy on offense. Like this is the same team coming back, and even they have looked rough on offense in their training camp. And I think they were both saying they kind of expect the Ravens to not be in their A form for this year. So if a team like the Ravens, even we don't know what to expect. Certainly, a team like the Browns, you don't know. I mean, It's all over the league. The Patriots, what are they going to look like? Tom Brady with Tampa Bay, what is that going to look like? Will that take a couple games? There's so many big shifts in this league this year, and there was a lot of movement in this offseason, and we just haven't had a chance to see any of these teams gel at all.
And by the way, none of this mentions the idea that these guys' off seasons were interrupted or they were otherwise distracted from doing what they would normally do to become the beasts that they normally become ahead of starting an NFL season. And then the last thing that I'll say is that I know that the Browns are an underdog. Yes, the Browns should be an underdog, but compared to all the other times in the history of the team where they've been an underdog, the opening week without any preseason in a pandemic year where you've got Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, Odell Beckham, and Jarvis Landry, there's always a chance that the Browns can actually win a game. And it's better than it's been 19 out of the last 20 years or whatever.
For sure. Like, I definitely agree with that. I mean, the Browns have, they beat the Ravens last year. I think Zach mentioned on the podcast, Zach Jackson on their podcast, that I think the Browns and Ravens have split something like 3 of the last 4 years or something like something weird like that, or 2 of the last 3.
That sounds insane.
It is insane. And it's kind of just, it kind of goes to show you the Browns have had their moments against the Ravens. It's got to be 2 of the last 3 because Harbaugh, I think, has only lost to the Browns 4 times. So I bet it's 2 of the last 3 years. But regardless, the point being, the Browns have played the Ravens tough multiple times over the last couple of years. And when you throw all of the variables you just mentioned into this thing, of course the Browns have a chance. But I think people can also miss me with any overreactions to this game one way or the other. I think if the Browns get absolutely just smoked and Jedrick Wills looks like a nightmare at left tackle and the defense looks atrocious, and you want to sit there and say, oh my gosh, we're going to go 0-16 again. Let's forget all of that. Like, there needs to be no overreactions. And if they beat the Ravens, let's not say, oh my gosh, they're so much better than we thought. Like, let's be happy if that happens, but let's not go crazy. But
this is the perfect year to just like be happy that we're all here.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I do feel like
participation trophies.
This is the perfect time though to play at Baltimore, right? Like, if ever there's a game of this season in which you have to go play at Baltimore, yeah, let's do it week 1 in the pandemic, no preseason year. Like, let's do that. Sign me up for that. I'd much rather do it now than game 16 where the Browns need it to get into the wild card. I'd rather get it out of the way early this year, and then you don't have to worry about it. If the Browns get smoked, oh well, you say, we knew this was going to be rough. All those talking points. Let's move on to the Bengals. And if you win, you say, man, this is great. We feel good about it, and we still have a lot to learn, and let's build on this momentum. And that's so. I don't really see how the Browns can lose in this, other than obviously like injury and things like that. But all the typical Browns things that are going to happen. But
man, there are definitely going to be some spoiled, sniveling Browns fans who are trying to react like it's week 1 of 2019 or week 2 of 2019. And it's going to be, I'm going to do my best to just laugh at it. But yeah, this whole season, I mean, I don't even know half the players on the Browns. I know I was following all the injuries and everything else, but I really learned these teams during preseason. Even the Browns team that I know better than most, I really get my knowledge of these guys watching them play preseason games, even if they're meaningless. At least it's a chance for me to see kind of like, oh yeah, so he runs, his gait looks kind of like that, or that guy's a little faster than I would have guessed, or he jumps a little bit higher. Like all these kinds of things, these subtle little things, we're going to be getting it in a meaningful game, which is very strange.
I think it's also an important thing to remember too is, well, we don't know who's calling the plays yet for the Browns. If it's going to be Stefanski or Van Pelt, we don't know. But whichever one it is, and if it's going to be Stefanski, has AVP, has he called plays before? I don't know. I don't know if he
Only
has or
once
not.
for like the Bills way back when.
Okay. So he at least has a little bit of experience doing it. Well, no, Stefanski called plays last year, right, for
Yep,
Minnesota.
he did.
So he has some experience too. So that's good. So at least it's not going to be totally a Freddie situation. Like, imagine if Freddie didn't even have a preseason last year
Oh
and
my
had to
God.
try to figure out how to get plays in. Um, but so there's going to be a little bit of that figuring out the timing of getting the plays in and getting everybody lined up. All that stuff has to get worked out, and that will happen. But I just feel infinitely better about where the Browns are today than I did, certainly at the end of last year. But I even feel like, in some ways, even though I like tried to be optimistic about last year, I had a lot of like nagging things that really bothered me about the team last year. And I don't know, like I'm not saying I think the Browns are gonna, like, I predicted them inside our Slack. I said 7-9, so I don't have them in the playoffs or anything like that. But I just think that we're gonna see a team that looks like a real NFL team, like an average NFL team. And I think that it's just going to hurt them too much that they lost all this time in the preseason. It's going to take them, I think it's going to take them too many games to get really hit their stride, and that is what it is.
But it's also a season that could play to being lucky.
Sure.
Maybe the Browns end up being the healthiest team as the season rolls along. Maybe they end up being deeper than we think because people crop up out of nowhere. Like the one thing about the NFL is it's chaotic, and all the extra games that guys play from playoff runs seems to really take a toll in the following season. And I that's not a rosy prediction for the Browns. It's just saying, like, when you finally have a team that you feel like is talented, the biggest disappointment about last season was that our confidence or our predictions or our good feelings weren't unjustified. They truly missed all their expectations by a long shot. And that's not to say that they should have won the Super Bowl last year, but there's no doubt in anybody's mind that given the talent on the team, they should have been better last year. And so they are again returning a team that has the talent to compete. Whether they're ready to compete or not is another question, but anything's actually possible. So it's the wonderful season where anything's possible, but the expectations aren't so high that we have to be like super disappointed if they don't hit them.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone this long without, talking about Baker, so I'll kind of swing this into Baker a little bit. But when you talk about the talent of this team,
Is he
like,
important? Do we need to talk about him?
obviously, the defense is, they have some elite playmakers on defense for sure. Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Sheldon Richardson's a great player. I like OV a lot. So there's guys who can play. But the injuries have just been pretty devastating for the defense, and there's a lot of unknowns about the linebacking group. So that's gonna be the big question mark. When you talk about the talent on this team is on that offensive side of the ball. And when I look at last year, there were two main problems with the offense, and it was the offensive line's complete inability to block last year, and then obviously Baker's erratic play. And the Browns certainly addressed the offensive line. Conklin was an incredible pickup. I was ecstatic with that. I liked the draft pick of Jedrick Wills. I think we have to be patient with them because, switching the position. But the point being, the offensive line in the Wyatt Teller, we'll see. But they revamped that offensive line, and it should be dramatically better this year. So you look at that, that's shored up. Tight end, we added Austin Hooper, which is an incredible pickup. Harrison Bryant, the rookie, is actually looking pretty solid. And you bring Njoku back. And then obviously the wide receivers and running backs, we've talked about plenty of talent there. So much of this offense is truly going to fall on Baker's shoulders this year. And we need to see him get back to what we saw when he was a rookie. I don't know how much of it last year was, whether it was overconfidence, whether it was a horrible offensive line play that affected his confidence to be in the pocket, how much of it was the dysfunction in the coaching staff, and certainly the when we hear the stories of Todd Monken and Freddie going at it and really butting heads, and each of them telling Baker different things, there's all the excuses in the world if you want them, but
Makes you
it's
respect Todd Haley, huh?
yeah, uh, but it really falls down to it's on Baker's shoulders. There's a lot of pressure on Baker this year. He has to show that he is the franchise quarterback for this team that we all certainly thought he was after his rookie year. I still remain pretty confident in Baker. I'm a big Baker guy. I want him to do well, and I really think that this offense is suited for him. I think the coaching staff is so much more mature, and I think they're really going to work to put him in a position to succeed. But we're going to need to see those results, and they have so much talent on that. This should be a very good offense. We just need Baker to cut down on those turnovers and get back to the guy that we saw originally.
It's the ultimate offense for Baker Mayfield. It's an offense that hands the ball off. It moves the pocket. It relies on play action passing. He can throw on the run. All the things that Baker does well. It should accentuate. It should make him the best version of himself. Whether or not the installation is ready for prime time, whether or not Baker's ready to run it. It was good sports talk radio fodder to talk about Case Keenum and whether he was better suited to start the season. There's zero doubt in my mind right this second. If you had to win one game, he's got a higher floor just for this moment in time. But we all understand that NFL teams can't, shouldn't, and don't aim for the floor. They aim for the ceiling, because if you aim for the floor, you're going to hit it, but you're never going to get over the top. You're just never going to. And I know it sounds funny because Browns fans always talk themselves into this idea that, well, I would just take competitive. I would just take mediocre. They've been so bad, but you wouldn't. You really wouldn't take. You wouldn't take mediocre. It wouldn't even be fun.
I would argue to a certain degree, like the Browns last year. I mean, the Browns did not go 1-15 last year. They were 6-10, and they were in many of these games. And so you saw a little bit of what competitive but still bad looks like. It's not that much fun, They certainly weren't normal. They were obviously dysfunctional. But in terms of being competitive on the field, they were competitive. And the 49ers, crushed them. I'm trying to think, I don't know that anybody, and the Titans, those were the only games that I feel like the Browns were really, run off the field last year. I mean, they were in, every other game that they lost. And, and again, so 6-10 is not, we've seen 0-16. We know what 1-15 looks like.
Yeah, they lost. So they beat the Jets 23-13 after losing to the Titans 43-13. They lost to the Rams by 7. They beat the Ravens 40-25. They got killed by the Niners. That was an embarrassing game.
Yeah, that one was pathetic.
They lost by 4 to the Seahawks. They lost to the Patriots. Who cares? They lost to the Broncos by 5.
They had no business losing, but yeah.
And then they killed the Dolphins 41-24.
That's right.
That's what good teams do. They take advantage of weaker opponents. They win the games they're supposed to win.
Yeah. Well, they beat the Jets. They beat the Dolphins.
They lost to the Cardinals 38-24, which sucked.
They beat the Bengals both times last year, I think. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So they beat the teams they were supposed to.
Losing to the Steelers with Duck.
Yeah, that was
But your point is well taken. This was a relatively mediocre, not the worst ever, but a mediocre football team, and nobody had a good time.
Right. It was exacerbated by the dysfunction. The dysfunction is what made it such an uncomfortable season. I mean, and I'm not just talking about Freddie Kitchens. I'm talking about the reports of Odell Beckham telling teams to come trade for him. Come get me. Obviously the Myles Garrett, helmet incident, and then the claims that, he was called a racist slur, I'm just saying, like, all of these
Oh,
things
Freddie's
were all,
T-shirt. I forgot
and
about
Freddie's
Freddie's T-shirt.
T-shirt. Yeah, man. Like, there was a lot of just dumb storylines for this team that last year, and that's why the talent still, like, this talent was still there and it was evident, you know, in the worst year possible. Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham both caught for 1,000 yards. Nick Chubb was second in the NFL in rushing and should have finished first. Uh, any way you look at it, like, there were good things that happened on the field last year. They just couldn't get out of their own way, and the coaching was such a nightmare. And we talk about, again, I'm not going to sit here and make every excuse in the book for Baker, because I think Baker will tell you, some of it was his own doing as well, certainly. But when we can't get plays called in time, and Baker is sitting out there trying to get people in position right as the play clock is winding down, he's not making any reads or doing any of the things that a normal quarterback does. He doesn't have time to audible. There was none of that last year. It was a mess.
Well, and
And
I'm not gonna try and tell you that guys like Njoku, who was hurt, and Rashard Higgins, who was in the doghouse, and I'm not telling you that these guys are the difference makers, but it once again felt like the front office put a team together, and the coaching staff was like, I don't like this.
yeah,
And so that kind of that jousting and that pissing contest, I don't feel like, it never feels like it's possible ahead of the first game. But I mean, and there's no guarantees, but the idea that we would have that same kind of thing with Stefanski and Andrew Barry seems nearly impossible.
it seems completely impossible. I know it's not impossible, but we have never had such alignment.
And you and I never would have said, oh, no, it's impossible when it was Farmer and Patton. We would have said, well, probably about a 30-40% chance.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about it, like, all of these times the Browns were always hiring out of sequence, right? Like, it was one year you're hiring your GM, one year you're hiring a president, or one year you're hiring your coach. And they're always like all these guys with different backgrounds and different philosophies. And, I, regardless of how this all turns out, I love the fact that not just Andrew Barry, not just Kevin Stefanski, but Paul DePodesta, like, all of these guys that are influential voices in Berea are all the same type of people. They approach the game the same way. They think the same way. They speak the same language. You can't tell me that's not important. You just can't. I think it's very important. And I feel
And
encouraged. Like,
none of them speak Haslam. So we got that going for us.
yeah, yeah. And I just think, like, I don't know how many wins that makes, how many wins that makes you better than anybody else or anything like that. But I just think you're just getting rid of all of these distractions and the pushing and the pulling. And I think that when you have that kind of alignment, it filters through the entire organization. And I feel like we've seen that a bit. Even I see so much more harmony between the assistant coaches and Kevin Stefanski. Last year, when I would watch the training camp and they would do the media sessions, and Todd Monken would come up there and say one thing, and then Freddie would go up there and he would say something else, and somebody would say to Freddie, well, Monken said this, and then you'd see Freddie kind of tilt his head and be like, well, he shouldn't have said that, and and then he would, like, make a playful jab or something. But it was just like, they didn't seem like they were fully on the same page. And everything I've seen this year between Van Pelt and Woods and Stefanski and even the position coaches, they all speak the same language. Like, they're saying the same things.
And other than their little gamesmanship over who's actually calling plays or not, they're not being cloak and dagger and stupid. It feels like they're giving honest answers. It feels like, they're focused on the right things instead of pretending to be Belichick actually makes you Belichick. They feel like they're being themselves, which, we saw the cut rate Belichick when Mangini was here. I don't know what we saw from Pat Shurmur, but we saw the Pat Shurmur show. Like, the Pettin thing, he was always trying to be one of the Ryan brothers. He was not his own person. And I liked Pettin. I thought he was a pretty good coach.
I agree.
But Stefanski doesn't feel like, he's not emulating anybody. They didn't steal their culture from anybody. Andrew Barry doesn't sound like any executive we've ever had or that I've ever heard from another team.
You know what's unique about Stefanski, and I think
let me interrupt for 1 second. So
yeah.
that isn't to mean that that's guaranteed for success, but it means that this actually truly feels different than what we've seen before. It feels like a different approach.
Correct. Like, we're not going to have those distractions that we're sort of used to. And I think what's unique about Stefanski, when you talk about that, he's not going to emulate a coach because he didn't grow up coaching under just one guy. He is a product of an organization, which is very different. He worked at Minnesota under, I think, 3 different head coaches.
Yep.
That's unique. That doesn't happen a lot. And
that's usually reserved for special teams coaches in Cleveland.
What's funny about special teams coaches too is that special teams coaches could sometimes make pretty darn good head coaches. But Stefanski, I just think he's not beholden to one philosophy, one identity. He's seen different coaches and how they do things. He's been able to take bits and pieces from different systems and different mentalities, and he's got all of that working for him, and that's why he's an attractive candidate, and that's why I was excited when they hired him, and that he was the guy that I wanted more so than Josh McDaniels, because I like that, he sort of sees the game from a lot of different perspectives, and it fits with what we have with Andrew Barry and Paul DePodesta, and I'm just encouraged by it, and I hope that they have success because I want to root for these guys for a long time.
So counterpoint, do you think the Haslams have finally learned enough to not only hire the right people, but to empower them, to put them in the right positions, stay out of the way, and do the things and not do the things that they're supposed to not do in order to make everything kind of work in harmony?
No. And
that's the elephant in the room, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it has to be. And here's the thing. I can see why Jimmy Haslam is a successful businessman. He is a charmer. And when you listen to him talk, you want to like him. You want to believe what he is saying. He knows how to say what you want to hear, and he says the right things. And you're like, man, he's really, they're really coming around. Like, he gets it now, and it's so easy. He's a charming guy. He sat
in the dog pound when he got here.
Yeah.
He was the anti-Randy Lerner.
Yeah. And so, as I listened to D and Jimmy, they did a Zoom press conference from their house, and I watched it and I listened, and I was like, man, I really like what they're saying, and I was like, man, it just feels good. Like, but then I realized, like, this happens every year with him. Like, every year I listen to Jimmy speak, and I think, man, he's learned, because he knows how to say the right thing. But at the first sign of trouble or turmoil, he panics and he wants change. And until we see him allow there to be some, I don't want to, not drama, but allows there to be some negativity, some turmoil, I'm struggling to think of the word that you overcome, adversity.
Right. Yeah.
So until he allows there to be some adversity and allows guys to figure out how to overcome that, I am not going to give him the benefit of the doubt on this. Let
me tell you about a podcast I was listening to just this afternoon. It was, I think it was The Economist. They were talking to Reed Hastings from Netflix. And he was talking about just how different Netflix is from his first company. And I don't remember what his first company was, but he said, I was running this company and I was really big on process. And every single time something would go wrong, I would build a process so that we wouldn't repeat any mistakes. And eventually we ended up with this company that had process and process and process and process. And we had all these people who could execute processes and liked processes, but it took all the creativity, it took all the heart, it took all the feeling out of it. And it feels like the way Reed Hastings was addicted to process, Jimmy Haslam's looking for like that magic button, that magic solution. And it just doesn't exist. And it's about hiring good people with potential who can work together and letting them do it together. That was part of the reason why I was so mad about John Dorsey. It's not that I thought John Dorsey never made a mistake or was perfect or anything else, but like, let him survive the Freddie mistake. Let him survive it. And it's fine that they didn't. I'm okay with it. But this idea that nobody could ever survive a mistake in Berea was almost as big a problem as anybody they ever hired.
Yeah, I think I said at the time, that I understood, the Dorsey hiring Freddie Kitchens obviously was a colossal mistake, obviously. But at the same time, and Dorsey made some questionable moves with the team as well. I was never a big fan of him trading Zeitler. It's like we finally have our franchise quarterback. Now let's weaken our offensive line. I hated that move. So fine, so be it. But John Dorsey was a really liked figure by a lot of Browns fans, and for a reason. He added a lot of talent to this team. He transformed that roster fairly quickly into a roster that had some real talent. And you're absolutely right. Like, he did not have a very long leash, and I don't know why he needed to have that short of a leash per se. Now, am I mad that they let him go? Not really. I get it. We just talked for how long about how much we like the cultural alignment that we have, and it's clear that there was not that alignment all the way through with DePodesta and Dorsey. Be that as it may, your point stands. Like, you have to let guys figure out how to overcome things.
And for all the mistakes that he made or is perceived to have made, I love the idea of Dorsey plus Highsmith and Elliott Wolf. And I mean, we enjoyed Hard Knocks because we felt like they were pros. And they hired a really bad head coach. But
a head coach that a lot of us were pretty happy they hired.
Sure.
Let's not forget that. Like, we can't all sit here and say, man, we knew that was a dumb hire. Like, there was a lot of Browns fans, myself included, who wanted Freddie to get that job.
All right, so we're going to break things up. Josh Poloha is on the line. We are adding a third person to the stream for the first time ever. Let's see how this works. He's like leaning back. He's getting ready.
No, I'm good. I'm here.
What's up, Josh?
What's happening?
Hey, Josh.
Is this microphone working? Because I just hooked it up. All right, cool.
Oh, he's failed podcasting 101. He's not wearing headphones.
Yeah. AirPods.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Come on.
He's so big. He's such a giant human being. I couldn't even see the AirPods. For those who don't know, Poloha is big enough to be a WWE wrestler, legit.
Wait, of all the sports you could have said, you said WWE wrestler?
Well, I mean,
come on, offensive lineman.
Power forward.
No. When I stand next to you, I think all those fake stats that they had for Andre the Giant, 7'4", 500 pounds, anyway. So we were talking about the Browns. We're giving our little not quite preview because we leave the real previews to the Browns Friday Fumble.
Yeah, that's a serious preview.
Yeah,
X's and O's and everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew and I didn't even have any funny names.
No, we're not that good. We're not the pros.
So anyway, I know you're kind of a fantasy nut, Josh. I'm gonna let you handle a little bit of Browns fantasy talk. No, seriously. I want to, because how many years have we watched the Browns and we had like dismal fantasy players on the Browns where you'd be embarrassed to even draft a Brown in a fantasy draft.
Unless it was Phil Dawson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But now it's almost hard because you're worried about, is Jarvis Landry going to steal opportunities from Odell Beckham? Is the split workload between Chubb and Hunt make either one of them kind of undraftable or kind of mute their impact in fantasy, would you ever take a chance on Baker Mayfield? And if so, which round? Like, what was how many fantasy teams do you have?
This is the most I've ever had. I'm in 4. I'm splitting with 2. I'm splitting one with my brother, one with my buddy, and then I'm in 2 by myself.
All right. And so how did you approach fantasy drafts when it came to the Browns? And I'll go first, just so I give you an example. Like the one and only fantasy team that I have that I quit and they pulled me back like it's Godfather. It's all people from the East Coast. So from Boston down to New York. So their Browns knowledge is nothing at all. But like it's an auction draft too. So when I wanted to like pull them in and overbid on somebody, you put up Le'Veon Bell because he's the running back for the Jets, and they're like, "Ooh, Jets." So anyway, how did you think about the Browns?
Edelman go for $80.
He went for like $15. I was like, do they not know his quarterback is gone?
I did my first auction draft this week, and it was with a bunch of guys that are Bears and Packers fans. So every time I was like, all right, Rodgers is going up, and then Devontae Adams is actually good, but Rodgers went for like triple his value. Adams went for a lot more than he should have. Mitchell Trubisky went for like $5 when he should have only been $1 or like less than $1, even though it couldn't be.
He didn't get drafted in my league.
Yeah, I think I threw him up, so they wanted him, I guess. I don't know why you'd want Mitchell Trubisky. But as far as Browns go, I don't know. It's like we had so much hype going into last year with Freddie, and it seems like we were all let down. So I feel like, at least for me, I'm not having any expectations this year because I don't want to be let down. I'd rather just be surprised if they're good rather than let down if they're bad. But I think they're going to be good.
But like which fantasy was there a fantasy sleeper? So for example, in my league, it seems like everybody missed the boat on Austin Hooper and the fact that he's joining a tight end friendly scheme. And so I was able to get Hooper like super late after 3 guys had already finished their draft.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because Baker Mayfield's his quarterback or if he has Landry, Kareem Hunt, and OBJ in front of him as pass catchers maybe. But, I mean, he was like a top 5 tight end in Atlanta. And then in my league, I think he was like the 15th one off the board. I was like, holy cow.
And mine is a league of Browns fans, and even there, he was very overlooked. He went for like $3 or $4, like way late in the draft.
Same, yeah. I was surprised at how late he went. Even auction, as far as auction, it was how cheap he was, and snake draft, how late he went.
Yeah, my league switched to the auction draft. And the auction, the salary cap draft like 3 or 4 years ago. And that has just been the greatest switch we ever made. Yes. We got 2 keepers and salary cap so that, it feels like draft day is more fun than the rest of the league year.
This is the first year I've ever done an auction draft, and I liked it a lot. It seemed like you could basically get whatever player you wanted if you wanted to pay for him, which is pretty cool. And also, spoiler alert, Craig keeps talking good about his fantasy team because it is stacked.
Nobody cares about your fantasy team, right?
But
Go ahead,
the
Andrew.
thing is like, so in your traditional snake drafts in the fantasy football, more than any other sport, like if you didn't have a top 3 pick, which is just in most leagues, it's just random. You show up to your draft and Yahoo assigns the order, and if you're not in the top 3, you're probably going to have a hard time. Like that's just the way it's been for a very long time in fantasy football. And the auction draft really opens it up. There's no order. It's you figure out your strategy on how you want to spend your money and assemble the team you want. And to me, it just makes it so much better, so much more interesting than your traditional snake draft.
Yeah, and especially in non-PPR leagues, like if you don't have a top 3 pick where you're getting CMC, Zeke, or one of those guys, you have to have a perfect draft in order to compete. Because Christian McCaffrey, I looked at the projected points. He had 50 more projected points than the next best running back. And I had the 8th pick in my non-PPR league. So that put me like 100 points behind from the start.
Yeah.
So I that's part of the reason why I like PPR too, is because it sort of evens it out. Like it gives guys like Michael Thomas more points to compete with CMC
Yep.
and those kind of things. But
that was kind of
draft is so tough.
Yeah, that was kind of like our transition. Like we started in just a standard football league, and then it was like we were just running into that problem where it was like, man, like this sucks. Like every year, it's the top 3 picks are the 3 best teams every year.
Yep.
So then we switched to PPR, and that definitely helped a little bit, but it was still a little bit where it really felt defined by the draft order to a certain degree. I mean, having the 12th pick, even in a PPR league, is very hard. In fantasy football more than any of the other sports. And so then we decided to switch to the auction, and we've loved it ever since, because it just makes it so much more competitive. And when you show up to the draft, everybody has the exact same opportunity to draft the same team, because we all have the same budget. Ours is $200. You all have $200, and
so ours is 200 minus. There's a penalty for your 2 keepers, and then
we have that too.
If you work the trade deadline in the previous year, so like my buddy Chris, after his 2 keepers, had $88 left.
Yeah,
because he spent it all to try and win. But in this league, it's fine actually, because like everybody overbids on the first 10 or 12 players, and honestly, my league is kind of stupid. Like people actually pay money for defenses and kickers, and it's like if you look at my draft, I have $4 in 2 defenses and a kicker. That's it.
That's how you do it.
If you spend a dime more, $1 more than 3 or 4, maybe $5, you're insane.
I think a defense went for $5 in my new auction league, but I think it was the first year auction league for a lot of people, not just me.
Yep.
Still, you have to be smarter than that.
We all, in our league, the top defense always goes for a little bit more. It's just there'll be a couple people who are just like, you know what, I want that best defense. Maybe they just feel they have the extra money to spend, whatever the case may be. I've just never been one to do that. I settle for what defense I can get, later on.
And that hack thing, people always overdraft or overpay for tight ends.
Yeah, which I do. I do it because of the way our scoring is in our league. We actually there's a lot of value in having one of the top. There's 4 tight ends who are head and shoulders above everybody else. So I always want to make sure I have one of those, because then most weeks I'm playing, that's a guaranteed positional win. I'm going to win the tight end battle.
Did any of you draft Gronk or make fun of somebody who did draft Gronk?
I was staying far, far away from
He
Gronk
went
and
for
Brady.
So much money in ours. I couldn't
Really
believe it. Yes. I don't remember.
Even though he's a third option too?
Yes. It was insane. I was like, you guys realize this isn't 2015, Tom Brady and Gronk in New England. This is a new situation. We have no idea how that's going to play out with him. He didn't play football at all last year. No way would I spend more than, I'm pretty sure he went for around more than $15 in ours. It was
our good friend on Twitter, Exiled Clevelander, says he got Gronk for $3 and wouldn't have paid $1 more.
Yeah,
so that's good. You can get Gronk for $3.
Yeah,
that's a lottery ticket.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So go ahead.
Go. No, I was just talking about Brady, and I feel like they're so overhyped. They're going to be good, but not that good.
I have no idea what to expect. I have no idea what to expect out of that.
And their defense is horrendous.
It's kind of weird because, I feel like Tom Brady.
Their offense is their defense, brother.
I don't really feel like Tom Brady's a great fit for a Bruce Arians style offense. Bruce Arians likes to throw down the field, and I'm not sure that that's Tom Brady's game anymore. Certainly last year it wasn't, and I know they didn't have the wide receivers that he has, in Tampa. Obviously, they've got receivers capable of stretching the field, but I don't know that Tom Brady wants to wing the ball down the field, a bunch of times every game anymore. I just don't think he does.
What we know for sure is that Tom Brady last year was playing that ball control, just keep that clock moving, dare the other team to make a big mistake. that kind of an offense. And Bruce Arians, to your point, he's very, very vertical, opportunistic, that kind of a thing. And the only times that we've ever really seen Tom Brady do that, he was, number one, a lot younger, and number two, had Randy Moss or some, complement of receivers that could do stuff like that. I'm just not sure that it's the magic bullet this time. You'd be an idiot to doubt Brady at this point, but
for sure.
But you'd also be an idiot to not assume at some point Father Time isn't going to catch up.
That's why I wouldn't bet on him either way. Like, let's just see what happens. It's whether it's real life or fantasy, like either way, it's just not. I'll sit out on Brady and just kind of see what happens.
All right. So last thing, Josh, what did you make? And we already talked about the contract thing and Chubb and Hunt, but what did you make of it from a fantasy perspective? Would it have deterred you from your pre-contract ranking of those guys?
No, I was listening earlier. No, I mean, it doesn't affect this year. If anything, it's like a win-win knowing that he's locked up in the next 3 years for super cheap. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't affect anything fantasy-wise, game-wise.
I still expect Chubb to have more fantasy points than Hunt, but it's going to be real close.
Yeah, I mean, even if he didn't sign a contract extension, I feel like he still would have been probably more of a third down running back where he'd be in the passing situations, maybe 2 running back wise. But yeah, I mean, Chubb's one of the best running backs in the leagues for a reason. Giving a guy $7 million for a 2-year contract isn't going to affect anything.
All right. Well, I think we've talked enough. This was fun. The 3-person podcast actually worked here for the end, and there's a real chance that you'll be able to catch Josh with another WFN Wire talking Browns this season. Maybe even on their own show. He's got a mic and everything.
Yeah. We'll see about this one.
All right. Well, thanks so much for watching, listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. Make sure that if you're listening on the audio feed, or if you're watching on the video, actually, you're sticking around for the Browns Friday Fumble. It will be posted bright and early on Friday morning, and we're excited for it. And we hope that more and more people come into that tent because it's a lot of fun.
It's very serious. All X's and O's.
At Rodeo Polohas. Free appetizers till 6. All right, we'll talk to you next time.
All right, see you guys.